Canada, our home and native land. Welcome into Snow The Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, the People's Podcast, the Players Podcast, the Prognosticators Podcast, the Pedialyte Podcast, the only Flyers podcast. I am reporting live from north of the border. The Poutine Podcast. I am reporting live from a country where they are still convinced the Edmonton Oilers have a chance of winning Lord Stanley's Cup. I don't believe that, and thankfully they didn't ask me at customs if I believed it. But I'm Russ Joy. You can find me on Twitter at JoyOnBroad. I'm joined as always by the illustrious Anthony SanFilippo, who spent his morning in Voorhees listening to, perhaps even speaking with, Danny Briere and Brent Flahr. I'm going to give everybody the heads up, especially those who aren't watching live. There's a good chance that at some point on this show, I will drop out a few times. I told Ant earlier, so I have this apartment. It's not mine. Wish it were. But I have this apartment. Great view of the Rogers Center right over here. Great view of the CN Tower, the big TV tower right over here. And I wanted to use that as a backdrop. Couldn't. I had tech issues. And then as Ant and I went to go get on, I was on the Wi-Fi in this place. It was 300 megabytes. And then right as we went to go, dropped down to 4. So now we're using my Wi-Fi hotspot. I might run out of data. Who knows? But we are here and we are committed to the fine folks here on YouTube, Facebook, and X. And those who listen to the podcast, view it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. Anthony, I've done a whole lot of talking. And that's because I'm not going to say much the rest of the show. You're the guy who is down there in Voorhees. We do want to welcome the people in. And Ant, we're going to do something here that we don't usually do because typically it's me, you, and Bundy. But I am going to put the comments on the screen if that's okay with you, if you don't have an issue with it. I could also move, if you're, it's kind of like a nice little pocket square there for you.
I'm fine with it. I will say one thing though. If our troll comment.
Oh, here we go. Never mind. I got it. Never mind. I turned it off. Over on the Russ Joy show, we don't discriminate against people who may or may not agree with our opinions on sports, but All right, so we'll pull up as many comments as we can as we're going. But welcome in. I brought the XLR stuff though, Ant. Like I did genuinely try to do a good job with the equipment, and it is, but I've been damned by the socialist internet up here, I guess. Can you call it socialist internet?
Something like that. Welcome to Canada. Yeah.
It's a great place. Yeah. Lovely country. Still haven't had poutine.
No, it's hard to find in Toronto. Harder to find in Toronto. Yeah. It's more of a Quebec thing. So if you were in Montreal, you'd be able to find it on every corner. But
found a Starbucks.
That's good. You didn't go to Tim Hortons? Groceries.
I made myself breakfast this morning. I don't know where there's a Tim Hortons near here. I have a thing where I have to go to a Starbucks. Wherever I travel, I have to go to a Starbucks. I have to get the mug. So I got an Ontario mug. I added to the collection. This is like my
I can't believe it.
All you have to trophies along the way.
Google it. It's simple. Tim Hortons. There's a million Tim Hortons.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm really excited.
Get a maple glazed donut at Tim Hortons.
There's a place down below that's like a burger joint, and they do the burgers on donuts. And I don't know how to feel about it. And I thought about getting one, but I don't know if I have it in me. Anyway, and there was a lot to take away from Danny Briere and Brent Flahr's meeting with the media today. And I'm sure you did a little bit of digging before and after the fact. So people are kind of panicked right now from what I can tell on Twitter. Shocker. I know that people are irrational on Twitter, but I've seen people getting worried that the Flyers are going to reach at number 6, and that they're going to go essentially off the board from what a lot of people would expect them to do at 6, much in the way that last year, Jet Lashenko maybe wasn't the consensus pick at that spot in the draft. Some felt like he might have been a reach. Can you reassure the people that one of the 6 to 8 names that we would expect to be in that spot will ultimately be the pick if they remain at 6? You're talking about maybe does a Porter Martone fall? Does a Higgins fall? Does a Frondell fall? Probably not, but maybe. Does a Denoyer fall? Will the Flyers go batshit crazy? And I think Kimmelman asked the question about Roger McQueen. One of those names, do you think any of those tickle the Flyers' fancy, or are they really going to do something here that's going to piss off a lot of people? Where are you at right now?
Well, let's put it this way. Caleb Denoyer remains their preference if he makes it there.
Okay.
I kind of got a sense from talking to some people within the organization that their intel is that Denoyer won't make it to 6. They believe so. I can pretty much tell you that your first 3 picks are going to be Matthew Schaefer is going to go 1, Michael Meese is going to go 2. And then Frondell is going to go 3. That is, I think, pretty much locked in, set it in stone. Nothing's going to change. Things start to get interesting at 4 because Utah's at 4. Now, keep in mind, Utah is a team, an organization over the last 2 years. 2 years ago, they were in Arizona. Last year, Utah, that kind of went off the board with their pick at 6 in both years. If you remember, there was a thought that they were going to take Mishkov at 6, preventing the Flyers from getting him, and they went off the board and went Simishev, who a lot of people had down in the teens, and then the Flyers were able to get Mishkov. Last year, they took Tija Ginla at 6, who people kind of thought was going to go in the 10 to 12 range, and they took him at 6.
Yeah.
So I think there's a real belief that they could be a little bit of a wild card in this thing. But there's a real thought that if it gets to if Denwye gets to Nashville, that's a really good fit for them. Most of their centers are big physical centers, so having a skill center that they can plug into that grouping, into that mix, makes sense. And he would probably be the most skilled available center left at 5 if he's there. Mm-hmm. Who goes 4 is the real indicator. There's some people that I talk to who think Brady Martin could be a guy that jumps up there to Utah. Obviously, James Hagan's name comes into play for both Utah and Nashville. So it's really going to be interesting to see what happens. Now, I know that Brent Flahr said today that they have a list of 10 to 12 names, but I think that what he meant by that is the entire group has a list of 10 to 12 names that they really like for their first pick, but that his list is really kind of narrowed down. And Danny even said it earlier in the press conference when he said a lot of the other teams are going to kind of dictate the pick for us because what happens in front of them will, they're going to narrow down the Flyers' choices to maybe 2 or 3 names that they're going to have to decide between. So when you say go off the board, the question is, what do you consider off the board? Like, I'm told that the next choice that they have after Denwye.
You better be careful.
What?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. No, I'm just saying you better be careful because I have a feeling that you're going to say something that's going to incense people. Your body language changed. That's usually when you unveil something
I don't
like
think,
that.
I don't think it'll incense people. I think that this name has gotten some positive commentary on social media. It's Jake O'Brien. It would be the guy. Okay. And the thing of it is that if you look at like Craig Button's list on TSN or Paul Bacala's list on Sportsnet CA, they have him ranked like 11, 12.
Yeah.
But Danny, even today, now he wasn't talking about any specific player when he said this. He said, the experts have their rankings and that's all well and good. He said, but I'd much prefer taking scouts who have, watched these guys 100 times over and written up 100 reports on them over a guy who watches a player on tape once or twice and decides that that's how they're going to rank a guy. So, like I said, he wasn't saying that specifically about Jake O'Brien, but it makes you, for him to say that, it makes you kind of identify that maybe they're talking about a guy that he was talking about a guy that they're really looking at. And it might not be a guy that anybody has him on 6, has him at 6. The big question, I'll throw this to you and then you can take it from there. Is
throw it.
Is it possible? And I wrote this. My story is out on Pattison, and I just put it out about 20 minutes ago, half hour ago. What if they trade down out of 6 because they think they can get O'Brien a little bit later in the first round? If Denwye is gone, where is?
How's that for an answer? I'll shut this shit down. Trading down? Are you out of your fucking mind? Have you telling me that after they finished with the fourth best odds of getting the number 1 overall pick, they fall 2 spots? They sit on the dais today and say, well, we were kind of bummed in the moment, but now we're not really that upset about it. If they trade down, Anthony, trade down, this city's going to light itself on fire. This fan base is going to light itself on fire. Now, I will give you one bit of credit here, or I'll give a little bit of merit to this line of thinking. If we are being fair and transparent about it, many of the people who follow this team have not watched a lot of film on these guys. They couldn't tell you the first thing about how Porter Martone plays. They couldn't tell you the first thing about Roger McQueen other than he had the back injury. They couldn't tell you damn thing about Ekman. They couldn't tell you about Brady Martin. They couldn't tell you shit about Jake O'Brien, except they just don't like hearing O'Brien. And they might not like hearing Denoye because there's another Denoye. Like, people don't really have much to work off of with these guys, if we're being fair, right? It feels like there is a very clear number 1. There is a very clear number 2 in Misa. And then 3 to what we thought was going to be 3 to 6, right? Has really kind of devolved into like 3 to 10, maybe even 3 to 12, right? Like, if we're being honest about it, if we're looking at what mock drafts kind of looked like at the end of the regular season, or even let's say like back in February, March, no one thought Hagens was going to fall to 6. There's a very likely possibility that he could. O'Brien was a name that was just starting to come up on the top 10. McQueen was a guy that, because of the back injuries, everybody thought was going to, maybe still end up being a top 8 guy, but could maybe fall to 15. But you really don't know what to make of that medical report. So I hate it. Genuinely, I hate the idea of trading back unless you are getting an additional asset that you're going to flip to get somebody in here who helps the team right away. But at the same time, I don't know what that looks like. There was the report out there that Chicago might be shopping number 3. There's that theory out there that Utah, because everything is found money at this point from jumping up 10 spots, that maybe Utah would trade out of number 4. I don't know if any of the guys who are going to be on the board at, like, let's say 4. I think Utah is more likely to move out. I don't know if, like, Frondel, for example, or I don't know, like, do you want to move up to get Denoye because you're convinced that he should be a top 4 guy? Like, I don't know. I hate the idea. I do. I think the optics of trading down are bad. I guess I could fundamentally understand how somebody could look at it and say, if it's a clear number 1 and a clear number 2, pick up the asset. But what's the asset, Ant? Like, it can't be a second round pick. Like, that doesn't mean shit.
So
like, what is an asset?
Here's Phil Original's comment, which I put up on the screen. It says, real question is, how much value can Briere extract from moving down 3 to 4 spots? I do it if the Flyers guy is available at 8, 9, 10, and you get a 2026 first round pick in return.
Unprotected.
So, I mean, that's his
unprotected, so that you get another potential lottery ticket, right?
Yeah, that's what his.
I mean,
he's cool with that. I mean,
you want another entry for Gavin McKenna. That's the hope, right? Like that.
Possibly.
But it can't be a bottom. Like, it can't be a contending team though, because that team's not going to be in.
No. So the teams that I identified in my story, that I'm told are trying to move up, and right now, I mean, and Danny said it in the press conference, nobody has indicated yet that they're willing to move down. Everybody he's talked to is trying to move up. So you got teams that are trying to go up, right? And when he said, and I want to read his exact quote, and then I'll get into specifics. Briere says, I'm going to make a lot of calls to try and gauge interest, but so far it's been pretty quiet on that front. It feels like everybody is trying to move up at the moment, and we've said from the beginning we'd like to try to move up if possible, but right now there's just not a lot of options there. So we'll have to be patient, and maybe there's an opportunity where we can create value going the other way. That's when he's talking about possibly moving down.
Wow, so the teams that are going the other way. They have the Alec Boehm spray chart here. I love that.
I think that you're looking at Anaheim as a team that wants to move up from 10. I think Detroit wants to move up from 13. I was told Montreal is willing to package both 16 and 17 together to move up to a certain spot in the draft. I don't think that they would go down that far. I don't think they would go down that far because I don't think that the player that they want falls that far. But I mean,
if McQueen falls to 16, but you just have no way. You have no way to know. You know me. I'm like very much on the McQueen because you can't teach size. I get that he didn't play exactly. There's the critique against him is that he doesn't play as big as his body is, which is a problem, right? Especially if you have a 6'5" frame. But if he starts to fall, my hope has been that they're going to trade back up from 22. I guess the question there, Ann, is like, all right, so say it's Montreal 16 and 17 together to move up to 6. It feels like the quality of player, right? That's in that, let's say 3 to 10 tier, 3 to 12 tier. That is a tier. And then it does feel like it falls off. And so I don't know how this team gets better that way. You know,
no, I don't think
then you are really talking about then you know, like that to me feels too far. Could Buffalo want to move up from 9? Did they get frisky and because that to me, like if you're gonna move back, Buffalo's gonna suck. So like you're hedging that you're going as long as it's an unprotected pick next year, that you have a high chance of potentially being in the Gavin McKenna sweepstakes, especially if as the Flyers you're hoping that your team's going to be playoff adjacent next year. Like that one maybe does it, but to trade to a team, I don't know. Trading with a team that could end up being playoff bound and trying to get like a pick next year out of it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, so Buffalo, we'll talk a little bit about Buffalo a little bit later because that's also something I wanted to talk about today. I think that they're a team that is got an itchy trigger finger. They got some money issues up there. I think that they're, right now, I think their asking price for their players is way too high, as it usually is this point out. Maybe that changes things. We'll get into Buffalo. I think that there is a possibility there, right? I mean, that is a maybe, but I think you have to really weigh what you're getting in a deal with them, right? So yeah, and look, the Flyers want to move up too, and I think that they want to move up from 22. When Danny says, "Well, we want to move up too," of course they want to move up from 6. I mean, obviously, they would if they could get the player that they really wanted. I just don't think that you're going to see teams in the top 4 or 5 spots trade out. I just don't think it's going to happen. So if they're not going to go up from 6, either they pick at 6 or they're going to move down. But they would like to go up from 22 into that teens range. Question is, how far can you go up from 22? And what does it cost? What is the price to do that? Now they have a glut of picks, right? So I mean, they could even potentially overpay slightly to move up from say 22 to say 15. Let's throw that just a random number. I know that's Vancouver. I have no, inkling that conversation has happened. I picked the number out of the air. But let's say you want to move up from 22 to 15. What does that cost you? Does that cost you the second first rounder? Does that cost you 2 seconds? Right? Like what is the price on that? And then you sit there and say, are you willing to do that for the player that you're going to go after? I think an interesting thing. Somebody told me today that we talked about Roger McQueen, and I asked someone today. I said, what do you think about him and with his medicals and everything? And I was told that the medicals turned out pretty good at the combine. Like,
damn,
everybody was, they were good. But the response was
good for him.
The response was McQueen can go anywhere from 5 to 15. Like they don't know. It's another wild card, just because you don't know. And your internet's starting to go, by the way. I don't know if you noticed this, but he could go anywhere between 5 and 15. And so you really have to try and figure out.
There's another bit of variance there though, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not just the skill, and it's not just why I think he could fall is if you look at the teams that pick after the Flyers, and you look at the tenure of their GMs, there are going to be some of these teams that are not going to want to use that high draft capital to take what could ultimately be a boom or bust player that some might have viewed as having a higher boom than bust because of the medicals. Now, maybe if you feel better about the medicals, then it's not as bad. But what do we know about GMs in this league, Ant? And GMs in like all professional sports? They do put a lot into keeping their jobs. Sometimes they make a pick that's a safer pick because they want to save their job more so than do what's best for their team. And so I wonder if there are going to be a few GMs that are going to look at the board as it develops and say, you know what, I might feel better about the likelihood of an Eklund ending up being able to make an impact sooner, or Brady Martin being able to make an impact sooner. And if they view McQueen as being somebody who's 3 years out, you might not have that time. Danny Briere on the flip side has time. He and Keith Jones, I think, still have a few seasons before the seats even start to get remotely warm. So they have the ability, I think, to take that shot. I don't think that every other GM in this league does.
No, it's fair. And I will say one of the things that Danny said in the press conference that I thought was really kind of an interesting thing that kind of goes to your point, and I'm loving that you're freezing mid coffee sip here, is that right now picks are just numbers, and that the value of a pick changes once a general manager is able to identify a name. So what he means by that is once another GM realizes, here's the player I can get with that pick, that might make them be more willing to play ball in a trade for that spot, as opposed to just taking a number and hoping that you get the guy that you want in that spot, right? So It's one of those things where that deal doesn't come into play until the pick is up, right? At that point, Sure. And it's like, oh, okay, now we'll make the deal. So I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. Another name, and I mentioned this in my story as well, that I know that they like, and you haven't heard boo out of the Flyers on this. I tried to ask a couple people today, and they wouldn't really engage on this, but I've heard it kind of through the grapevine, is Jackson Smith, defenseman, who is one of the first junior hockey players to make the jump from Canadian junior to the NCAA. Now that they've relaxed that restriction, you're allowed to jump from Canadian junior to the NCAA now. And Jackson Smith's going to go play at Penn State.
Intern Andrew's probably intern Andrew going to get his jersey. Do you think by puck drop in the fall? Right?
Yeah, there you go. Get his jersey. So I think that's a name that if Jackson Smith starts to fall down into the teens a little bit, and there's a thought that that's probably where he's going to go, then that's where the Flyers try and jump up from 22. I don't think he makes it to 22. I really don't.
No.
But can you get from 22?
I've seen mocks that have him going. Yeah, I've seen mocks that have him going closer to 12, anywhere from 10 to 12.
Yeah. Well, again, mocks are mocks.
Keep
that in mind.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
hard to imagine he falls that far. Trying to think, there's what the one defenseman who people have seemed like otherwise kind of interested in is the guy from Czechia, right? Is it Murtka? Radim Murtka? Yeah. He's been one that I guess maybe gets a look.
Yeah,
I don't know.
We'll see. I mean, and so I did ask Brent Flahr today during the press conference about 22 to 48, those picks, like what you're looking at there. And he said, what you see there is you have, wingers with skill, but maybe they're on the smaller side. Centers who are more middle of the lineup type centers, but still really valuable players. Or some bigger defensemen who maybe need a little bit more time to develop before they can get to the NHL, but you can be really excited about them because you think that the talent is there. It just needs to be molded and kind of worked. So that's what he said you're looking at between 22 and 48. So I think that there's some real interesting things that are going to happen with this team over the course of the next 10 days. It won't really kick in, I think, until the beginning of next week. I don't think anything's going to happen. Russ will be back. He's just trying to work it out. Yeah.
I'm just trying to get, I just checked on YouTube to see if my video is even remotely working or not, but man, it is absolutely brutal. See, on my side, I should send you a video. It looks great on my side.
Yeah, I'm sure
this is why the US and Canada can't figure things out, because
That's
up
right.
here, everything looks peachy and, wonderful. And, we're just putting poutine on everything. And then what you see south of the border is not.
So Justin Shaniki's asking, so Martone is no longer a thought at this point. I don't think he ever really was for them. I really don't. I do not think they're taking a winger at pick 6. They need a center, and that's what they're going to take. So I don't think Martone is really in the mix, unless for some reason he plummets, and then you could trade out. But I don't see that happening either. So no, I don't think Martone is a candidate for the Flyers at this point.
Why is it that he's not? I've lost you partway through that. Why is he not remotely on the radar at 6?
They're not looking to draft a winger. Like,
who the
at that
fuck
high.
cares? Can I bang the table, Ant? Can I just say, like, I am so sick and tired of the idea that, like, you have to draft for need all the time. Team sucks. Team doesn't have a lot of high upside guys.
I
get that they have a lot of wings. I get it. But if he's a good player, if he's the best player,
it's not even that. It's not even that. It's not that. It's not that. It's what you're doing is you're looking at it and you say, there are always wings available. There are always wings available in free agency. There are always wings available via trade. Wings are the most, where there's the most depth of finding it elsewhere, right? Sure, if there's no centers that are available that are worth taking above him, then yeah, you take the winger. But the reality of it is that in this draft, centers between spots 3 and 2, really, if you count Misa, between 2 and 12, centers are what's there, and that's what these teams are going to take. It's really what it is. So yes, they to answer Tony Louis' question, they take Jake O'Brien over Porter Martone. Yes, they would. Yes, and they would take Denoyer over both of them. So yeah, I mean, I just think that's it is what it is. So anyway, that's where it's at. Russ is still trying to figure his stuff out. I got a few other things that I wanted to talk about. Let me bring this one up first. Jamie Rollo says, would they really pass on Hagen's? Insane. I'm not convinced that they are going to pass on Hagen's, because I think Hagen's might get picked right before them. We'll see. I mean, there's a lot of, but if I'll tell you right now, if it is O'Brien and Hagen's, I think they're going O'Brien. I really do. And I think it's a tough call for them, but I think that they're going O'Brien. I really do. So, and I know fans are not going to be happy with this. It's fine. If you're not happy with it, you're not happy with it. Right. It just is what it is at this point. Let me go over a few other things that I wanted to that I've kind of looked into that maybe don't have anything to do with the draft. So, hi, welcome back, Russ. So maybe I won't go into all of my list of topics.
Is this better now or now?
Yeah, well, it is for now. Yeah, for now. So
I give it a reset.
Yeah.
All right, so I heard most of what you said, but I think most people, a lot of people, some people who have been evaluating these players for long enough over the past year have said that Martone is a top 8 pick. And if he's there at 6, the idea that like they would have him automatically ruled out because he's a wing, to me, is a mistake. Just conceptually. I just think it is.
Well, but here's the
I worry.
the thing. Like,
and I do understand like what you're saying, because we could take what Danny said, right? Danny said that, what teams are expecting right now for like like 4Cs are available, but it'll cost you a second line winger to get a 4C. Like, he's being hyperbolic, but like, I get it. The fear, though, is that if you are so locked into we need to take a center, and that center doesn't end up panning out, it's almost like do you remember there was a guy who was the GM of this team? I don't know. I want to say like 7 years ago, give or take. I think his name was Ron Hextall. Was that his name? And he chose to go after the position of need because he was of the belief that the blue line was strong enough, and that guys like Miro Heiskanen really weren't worth it. Let's go get the best center on the board. Let's go get Nolan Patrick. Now, I get it. Extenuating circumstances, concussions, all that. Fine. I just worry because does this team need a defenseman? It sure does. But there's only really one top-tier defenseman. And then the bottom falls out, right? Like, there are going to be other first-round graded defensemen, and maybe you'll end up picking one at 22 or at 31 when Edmonton loses the cup, right? But, like, if there is a significant talent disparity and Martone is there at 6, then maybe that is the point where you do have that conversation about trading back, right? Like, if the board goes kind of wonky, right, from 1 to 5, something goes sideways, then maybe I can get behind the idea of trading back because there are still more centers on the board. And whoever wants to move up to 6, you have the assurance is going to take the winger. Well, then fine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense, Russ. But what I'm trying to say to you is that they look at this and they see. I don't think that it's just sitting there saying we're going to pass on a winger just because he's a winger. But I think that they look at it and they say these centers, we see them as first line, second line centers. The group of them, whether the collection of 3 or 4 guys are going to be available there. And they would rather have a first or second line center. Those grades are going to be higher than a winger, no matter what, because of that, what those positions mean in the NHL. So it's not saying that they don't think Martone is a talented winger and they won't draft a winger just because he's a winger. It's because the centers that are there in the draft grade out high enough in your projections to say that value is far greater to get a first line center or a second line center than getting a scoring winger.
Yeah,
that's what
if Higgins is there, is he the pick?
I don't think so. I don't.
Really?
I don't. I think Higgins is third on their list at center behind Denoyer and O'Brien.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you think it's a size thing at that point?
No, I don't necessarily think,
because at that point he's what, 3 inches shorter than both of the other guys.
Yeah,
I guess they're not going to outwardly say that like the team is too small, but I do wonder if there's at least a little bit of sizeism here. I get that it's funny because Briere is not exactly the biggest dude in the world, but you do need some big bodies, right? Like you kind of do.
Danny was asked about that today, and he said, "Listen, no, you're not making a pick purely on a player's size." He says, "Does it come into the conversation when you're putting everything together?" Yeah, sure, certainly, as it would for any player at any time, at any juncture. And yeah, you're right. You can't have a team full of small guys. But he did say that they don't feel like they have a worry that if they draft a smaller player that they don't have enough size to kind of make up for the difference. So that I mean, I don't think that that's a thing too. I think that's something that's probably just out there that people like to talk about.
Jay Grebby here does have a good point, though. If you remember this time last year, right, like when we were looking at it a year out, Bundy did talk about the fact that a year ago, like Higgins was the name that kept coming up. Now, in fairness, there was a good long while where like longer term projections where the Higgins was going to be the number 1 overall pick. And obviously things have changed in a year. But it's interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean,
again, kind of speaks to the volatility of a trade, 12 months out, or of a draft 12 months out.
Remember, you're talking about teenagers here, and how are they going to project when they're in their 20s, right? When they're still not even adults, and you're trying to make this determination. So yeah, maybe at his going into his, age 17, 18 season, maybe James Higgins was a guy that you looked at and go, oh yeah, that's going to be the guy. And then a handful of other guys pass him along the way. Doesn't mean he's a bad player. Doesn't mean he's not going to be good in the NHL. It just means that, well, maybe we think that these other guys are a little bit better than he is, and they've accelerated their development faster than Higgins has. That's all. It's not a knock. I mean, James Higgins is going to play in the NHL. He's going to be a good player. They just think that there are a couple centers, probably 4. I mean, they're not going to get Misa or Frondell, but I'm sure they have Misa and Frondell ranked 1, 2 in the centers. Then they have Denoyer, then they have O'Brien, and then they have Higgins. I mean, that's just how they look at it. And so, again, I think it really comes down to, if they stay at 6, do they think that the guy that they want is maybe available 2, 3 picks later, and they can get something else in the deal as well? Yeah. That's what it comes down to. So Russ, we've talked draft for a good half hour here.
I think we should just keep going.
Do you want to get into some other stuff?
I think we should keep going. Do you want to talk about Bill Zonin? Does he do it for you? No? How about Jack Nesbitt? You want to talk about Jack Nesbitt? I'm telling you, man. I like Cameron Schmidt, man. I like Cameron Schmidt. 5'7", 157 pounds out of Vancouver, man. That's a guy. I could see that guy going a long way. I'm telling you, man. I've seen great measurables off that kid, man. I've seen big boards having him around 34th, but I've seen mock drafts taking him a little bit higher than that, Ant. You get that Edmonton pick at 31 because we all know those Oilers are going to choke, don't we? I don't even know if it's a choke. I think Panthers are a better team. We've known that all along. Skinner's a fraud. I'm telling you, man. Great guy. Great guy. All right, continue.
All right, thanks. All right, so let's talk about some things that have nothing to do with the draft.
Okay.
We brought up Buffalo earlier. They're in a real bind, contract-wise and the like. And so their GM, Kevin Adams, has been calling around the league, and he's talking to a number of players. I talked to somebody within the organization who said that they've engaged Buffalo in conversation. There's a few players that they're interested in there. But I don't think that there's anything that's really close at this point because Kevin Adams' asking price is way too high. The names that have been brought up to me were JJ Peterka, who I believe we talked about at the end of the regular season as a potential guy that they could have interest in as an RFA, but I want to get into that too. That was another discussion point that we had, and I think it's something that you're going to be happy to hear.
RFAs.
Although, so it's interesting. I can't wait to see what your reaction is because it basically takes two things that you champion and puts them against each other. And I'm going to be curious to see how you respond.
Okay.
So we'll get into that in a minute. So the Peterka
Don't tease me like that.
Yeah. Peterka is one of them. Another guy is Bo Byram. The Flyers have had interest in Byram for a long time and still have interest there. But again, the asking price is really high. The third player that I heard was Alex Took. But it sounds like, from what I was told when I started to ask, the more important people in the organization about it, that Buffalo is looking to re-sign him. So I think that name kind of comes out of the equation. So really, I think it depends on what it would cost for guys like Peterka or Byram. Like, what are you paying for that? So one of the things that really you got to look at, and this is the thing I wanted to kind of throw at you. This is like two of your philosophies coming to loggerheads. So you're Mr. Use the offer sheet. You RFA if you want to go after the RFAs. Great. So you look at a guy, like Peterka. Let's just use him as the example. Right? Say you can't make a trade for him, and you decide, well, we're going to offer sheet him. And Buffalo's financial situation is really bad. You can, signing bonus the hell out of it and poison pill that contract so that Buffalo has no choice but to let him go, and you get him. You have to give up a first round pick for that, right? So now the question becomes, are you willing to give up your first round pick in 2026 as part of a poison pill RFA, with the knowledge that there's a chance, albeit a slim chance, but still a chance that pick can turn into a generational player like Gavin McKenna? And the thought process is, Peterka's a third line center, maybe a second line center down the line. You're probably not doing it, even with that chance being so slim, because you would certainly have to finish top 11 and then get lucky in the lottery. The Islanders and Utah both jumped up this year. We saw it happen twice in the lottery. But I think that's more unlikely than likely. So you really have to make that determination. If it's for a star player, a first line type guy, then you do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But not for a guy who you look at and say, good player, not quite up to the level that we're looking at to be willing to abandon that first round pick.
Matthew Knies is the guy that you go after. Like age-wise, position-wise, upside, poison pill, team and financial disarray. Like Toronto's here I sit in the beautiful Toronto, Ontario, Canada. But that's the one that you go after. Knies is 22. I forget what the stat that I pulled on this was. There were 5 players. I think it was 5 players who entered last season aged 20, so 24 or younger to net at least 20 goals or 25 goals, something like that. He was right there with Mishkov. And so, like, if you're going to make a move and you're going to have to give up a first-round pick, I think the threshold is 9.3 million AAV is where the compensation jumps again, if I remember correctly, on RFAs, where is it a second first-round pick, like the following years? That's where you get into trouble. But, like, yeah, I think that if you have a guy and you look at it, so again, like, Knies to me is that guy. Does he raise your floor? He does. Does he potentially raise your ceiling? Indeed, he does. And does it potentially put you in position where you're going to be a playoff team next year? If the answer is yes, and if Danny Briere thinks he's going to overhaul this roster enough and improve it enough to be a playoff team, then you're not giving up a lottery ticket at Gavin McKenna because you won't be in the lottery. And so that's the calculus that the team has to do on it. I know that people, like, every time this offseason, I've thrown out the idea of, like, offer sheet. Like, there are good young centers available. That typically is the pushback. Then how are you going to give up McKenna? You don't have to. If you're going to be a playoff team, or you think that there's a strong enough chance, then that's it. And by the way, if you're a bubble playoff team, you can only move up 10 spots. So you're going to be somewhere in that, like, if you move up to 4 next year or 5, guess what? You're not getting Gavin McKenna, right? So I'm there for it, and I don't actually think that those two ideas have to go in direct opposition to one another. Now, this is where your idea of trading down from like 6 to 9 or 6 to 10 gets a little bit more interesting, because if you can convince a team that you think could be back in the lottery, like a Buffalo next year, you move back 3 spots, maybe you're not getting the highest upside player or the exact guy that you wanted in this draft. But if it's all part of the calculus of going out and getting that 1C right now, or the guy who projects to be a 1C like Knies, you're replacing next year's first round pick with potentially one that could end up being that same lottery ticket for McKenna. That's where I'd be at.
It's a lot of ifs. It's a lot of ifs. It's a lot of ifs.
Well, listen, I think on it. Here's the thing. Like, here's the thing with Knies, though, right? Toronto is in such bad cap disarray, right? Like, they're letting Marner leave. Marner's going to apparently get like 13 million or whatever. They're going to have to make a call on Tavares, or if the thought out there that Bennett might actually be interested, like, they'll probably end up having to overpay Bennett, or they'll keep Tavares. I don't think they'll have both. There's a path here where either you're poison pilling Toronto and longer term potentially hurting them, right? If they have to match the offer, assuming that Knies would sign it. And in a good scenario, you get the player. Like, are you really worried at this point about not being able to make a trade with Toronto? That if you upset Toronto, you're really worried, like, what, they're not going to still want Risto? They've wanted Risto for 2 years. They're going to stop wanting Risto? Like, I don't know.
No. I think that you're making a lot out of Toronto's situation. I don't think it's as bad as you're making it out to be. And secondly, one of the other things that we're going to get into is the cap and where it's at, because I'm hearing rumors that it's going to go up even more than the projections that they have down the line. Not this year. This year is 95.5, but that the projection for 2 years from now, which I think currently is 114.5, I think could get as high as 120 by that year. And so, yeah, the cap could go up to like 120 in 2 years. So that's the thing, is that, and this is one of the other interesting things, and I think this really kind of plays into it a little bit. Like, are guys going to settle for long-term contracts, knowing that 2 years from now, a $12 million player can make $20 million a year? I don't think it's going to happen. Right? So you really have to really now kind of get creative in free agency. In all honesty, I was told by someone in the organization that the Flyers wanted to sign Noah Cates to a longer deal, and he didn't want a longer deal. He wanted the shorter.
Smart by him. It was smart.
Yeah, right. Because now,
though, in fairness, he might have actually saved the Flyers from themselves on that.
Well, so the cap going up is only going to help players, and it's going to be harder on teams, right? So now teams have to. What I think ends up happening when this takes place is, I mean, it's like the circle of life kind of situation, right? So in the immediate, it helps players, because they look at it and go, we'll make more money now, and we'll make more money later on a shorter term deal. Like Matthews' contract is a perfect example of that, right? And guys getting 12.5 this year, but he's done it. He's a free agent again in 2 years. What do you think he's going to get? He's going to get 20, 25. Like Matthews is going to get, he's going to double his salary in 2 years because of the cap going up by up to $20 million from where it currently is, maybe even more. Like, so he's going to make a killing, right? So those things have already started happening.
Assuming things don't go sideways, though. Like there's always that chance.
Yeah, well, sure.
There's always that chance that things could go sideways.
Sure.
2 years from now.
But then what ends up happening, and this is what I talk about it being a circle of life kind of thing, teams will now go overboard, and they will start overpaying guys, right, to lock them up for longer. And so now some guy might take a 7-year deal at a price that he's certainly not worth. And the teams look at it and say the value isn't now, the value is years 6 and 7, because by that point the contract will be average. Mm-hmm. We might be overpaying now, but it's going to help us now, and whatever, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's a kind of an interesting thing. And I think it changes how the Flyers maybe start approaching things a little bit this year. I don't think that they're going after a big name free agent by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think that you're going to see them go after some free agents that maybe you go, well, that's an interesting signing. Why would they do that? Because they're going to have a ton of room to do it. And you know, they want to kind of keep things within a certain age range too. They're not going to go out and get a 35-year-old veteran guy. That's not going to happen. They're going to try and stay in this, mid to late 20s is kind of what they're going to look for. All right. Other things. What's going on with Cam York? So Cam York is not signed.
Hold on a second. Go ahead.
Well, how long are we going? We're at 50 minutes. I got a list of things to talk about.
I don't know. Do you have stuff? You have plans? You have dinner? You have like dinner plans with your wife? What are you doing here? What are we doing?
I got a job to do. I got other stuff to do. I'm editing today. I'm doing a lot of stuff today.
So what you're telling me, by the way, you didn't mention McTavish's name, by the way. Like, is the thought there that Anaheim is just going to match whatever he's given?
Mason McTavish? You're talking about Mason McTavish?
Yeah. Sorry, I might have broken up there.
Yeah. No, I don't think that there's anything there right now. I mean, I've not been told anything in that front. So I got nothing for you on that. So anyway, yeah.
I'm also an adult. I said Nyes was a center before.
Well, he's not. He's a winger.
Yeah, he's a winger. He's the left.
But he'd still help. He'd still help. They need left wings too, not as desperately as they need centers. But Cam York's situation is, they're in communication. This isn't like something that's been completely broken off. It sounds like they're just going to have that drag into the summer a little bit. Usually what happens is, one side makes an offer and the other side says, all right, yeah, give me 2 weeks. And then I'll get back to you. Yeah. At this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of where that's at. I do think that his name is slowly been floating out there too as a possibility to be moved. I don't think it's anything that's like they're trying hard or to get rid of him. I think it's just kind of like, it depends on what the return is. We'd think about it kind of thing. But I don't think that that's anything that's front burner. Let's put it that way for the Flyers. Another name we've talked about.
Can I ask you one?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Well, it was cap. It was cap related, right? So on the was it game 3 that Bettman was on the panel with Biz, and the idea of the Florida tax thing came up. I feel it was at somewhere early in the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah.
And Bettman essentially said like it's all nonsense, right? But like it is and it isn't. Like the tax thing isn't going to help if your team sucks. But when your team is good and you have guys that are willing to take 2-3 million less without tax, like I still think that it's an advantage, right?
Gary Bettman's an ass. Let me be honest. I mean, come on. I mean, we know when people talk to us, it's not being brought up on the show by Biz. Like those guys aren't bringing it up because it's not something that's being discussed. It's discussed among players, and he's trying to put a PR spin on it. Like, oh no, it doesn't matter. They'll play wherever.
Nothing to see here.
I mean, come on. It has nothing. Yes, of course. If a team is good, they're more attractive, But if a team is good in New York, if the team is good in Los Angeles, they're more attractive. But if a team is trying to do what Florida is in the middle of doing, right, where they were a bad team for so long, and say, all right, we're going to start bringing in these good players and we're going to start spending money. Isn't that attractive to go there because there's no tax? Of course it is. And it's an advantage to teams in Florida, Texas, and what's the other state that has
Vegas.
There's Vegas. That's it, Vegas. Like those states are gonna do well, man. Like they're versus
especially with good teams. Like I was having this conversation with a coworker of mine who lives just outside of Toronto, right? And he and I have been going back and forth about this, the Tavares and Bennett thing, right? Like depending on how this cup final goes, there's a non-zero chance that Tavares and Bennett could swap spots. Like realistically, it could happen, right? But with Bennett, right, there was the idea that was floated out there that like maybe an 8-year deal at $8 million AAV to stay in Florida, right, could be on the table for him. And then that was kind of refuted that like they haven't had contract talks in a while. And so I was talking to this coworker and I said, well, if you're Bennett, right, Bennett's going to get overpaid if he goes somewhere else. But like if the actual figure is like 8 million over 8 years or 8.5 million over 8 years, right? And you can have the chance to three-peat after Florida wins. You have the chance to three-peat, live in Florida, pay no tax, or take 10 million, maybe 10.5 to play in Toronto, where you are under the brightest possible lights, where the team has underachieved, where the team is like looking for that culture shift, and you're paying the tax, and Canadian taxes are higher. Do you really want to go through that for $1 million, $2 million a year? Like, I'm not so sure that you would. Now, then again, This isn't my money, right? But like in fairness, to me, like that's a no-brainer, especially if you get to no movement, then you really do stay in Florida for that whole time. But I don't know.
No,
it seems crazy to me.
I agree.
It's a clear advantage. It has to be.
Yeah.
How do you mitigate it though, Ant? Like you can't go to a cap percentage, right? Like you can't come up with a system that's going to like weigh the real life take home pay and make that the cap of the league. Like I've seen people kind of float that idea, but there's no way to equalize it, you know?
I mean, the way to equalize it, the way to equalize it is to have a cap minimum, like a salary minimum, a floor that is higher, that is, forces teams to spend a certain amount of money, and then maybe not have a cap, but maybe have a tax type situation like they have in baseball. Like you have the tiers.
And in basketball, like the aprons, first apron, second apron.
If you go past a certain level, then you have to pay a significant percentage of the tax on top of it. But it allows teams to go out and fair market for players. I think that's the way to go. I think a salary cap is bad in sports.
I agree.
I just do.
The aprons are tricky though. You really have to be careful on how you
basketballs is weird.
Well, it's weird because they've so it's funny. In the NBA, nobody cares. I know, it's just me. But they've essentially disincentivized teams who they've made it harder for the teams that do build the right way. Like Milwaukee ran into cap issues. Oklahoma City, who could very well win the NBA Finals, they built through the draft. They did what Hinkie did, but they were given a lot longer because they don't operate in Philly. But they're going to run themselves into a spot where they couldn't even retain their players if they wanted to, even if those guys wanted to take something of a pay cut. I don't think there's not a perfect model, but it's something. If this cap does go up, and it goes up 2, 3, 4 years, then maybe it is a conversation again. I'm just always worried about you start to bank on that idea that 2 years from now it's going to go up again. And what happens if it doesn't? What if it plateaus like it did these last few years, right? Where you were stagnant. And if that happens unpredictably, then all of a sudden when you start overpaying guys in the next year or two, believing that the cap's going to keep going up, maybe it doesn't happen. And then the contract looks even worse.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Wanted to revisit a name that we discussed during the season when rumors first started to come out. Remember we talked about Tampa prospect Isaac Howard?
Yes. Hobie Baker winner.
Yeah. Isaac Howard, obviously the news came out that he's definitely not going to get it worked out with Tampa. So they're going to have to move him. This is playing out far more publicly than the Gauthier thing did here with the Flyers. So it probably hurts Tampa a little bit as far as value. Flyers aren't interested at this point.
Wow. Is it an attitude thing, or they just don't think that it's worth the compensation?
They believe they have a better player in the organization that's coming up at the same spot, and that player is Denver Barkey. That's what they believe. So
okay,
just kind of throwing that out there as well. So.
Can I ask you about another player that they've been rumored to be interested in?
Sure.
So I remember seeing a week and a half ago, people saying they had intel that Maxim Shabanov was signing with the Flyers, implying that it was imminent. I just want to check, did Shabanov sign with the Flyers yet? Did that happen?
No, as a matter of fact, I believe their camp is waiting until after free agency begins because they want to see what the lay of the land is at that point. What's for them the best fit? I do know that the Flyers would love to sign him. They would, fingers crossed that he wants to come over. I know that they sent Mishkov on a recruiting mission kind of thing.
You want to play together. You want to win together.
I can assure you that whatever reports are out there that the Flyers made an offer and that he's coming here did not happen. They did not send an offer. They expressed interest, great interest. But I have a feeling that ultimately it's going to come down to location, and where a team is at. And so I think that I think Vegas is going to be the front runner there for him.
And they've been rumored to be around him since I think February, right? It was since February. The names that have come up the most are Flyers, Golden Knights. We saw the Penguins come up. One has to assume there are going to be more teams that are interested.
Oh, I'm certainly there's more. The other thing that's kind of an unknown, and as always with these Russian players, because it's just so how information gets around there is weird. But he may just go back. he may just go back and play in the KHL. May not even come over to the NHL.
Be kind of surprising, but maybe.
Well, he gets an ELC when he comes here, right? So
yeah,
you're kind of
fair.
capped. You're capped there. Maybe you look at it and say, I can make more money for 2 years in KHL, and then when the cap's at 120 million in the NHL, maybe then I'll go over, right? And then I can make even more money. So I mean, there's that possibility too, right? So that's a thing. Flyers are going to still hire yet another assistant coach. They're looking to hire a defensive-minded assistant coach. I heard a name that they are interested in, but I was told it's a long shot. And the reason it's a long shot is twofold. One, this person, I'll tell you his name in a minute. This person is currently a candidate for the Dallas Stars job. And secondly, if this person does not get the Dallas Stars job, there's a chance that they are an assistant coach in Dallas. And if not, and if they're not an assistant coach in Dallas, by the time that decision is made, it could be too late for the Flyers to wait that long to make a decision. So they may have to go in another direction. The player is Alain Nazardine, who was mostly an AHL defenseman, played a little bit in the NHL with the Penguins and a couple other teams. He's an assistant coach with Dallas currently. He's been the defensive coach for the Stars for the last couple of seasons on Peter DeBoer's staff. He was with the Devils before that. So obviously he's worked with DeBoer in a couple of places. But he's still under contract technically with the Stars. He was not fired when Peter DeBoer was fired. So he's being considered for their head coaching job. If he doesn't get it and they bring in another head coach, will that head coach want to keep him as a defensive coach because he's already under contract? That's why I think it's a thing that's going to be too long for the Flyers to wait to determine whether or not they can talk to him. They would really love to get him because of how good a job he's done in Dallas. So we'll wait and see. I don't know how much longer they're going to hold off, but they want to get into a third assistant coach to come in and be a defensive coach for the team.
If he puts the Flyers on ice and then he doesn't get the Dallas job and he doesn't get an assistant job in Dallas, you know what Danny Briere would probably be within reason to ask.
What happened there?
We miss Bundy today. Bundy, congratulations, by the way, to Chris Jr., who is graduating high school today. That's why Bundy's not on the show today.
Bundy's
got a
very
busy week for him, man. He's got his son graduating high school today. His daughter's getting married next Friday. Like, got family
next
coming
week?
in from all over. Yeah, next Friday.
What is next week? Good God.
Next Friday. A week from Friday. Yeah. So, yeah. So it's good for Bundy. Keep him busy summer for him. But we'll get him. Intern Andrew's doing well. People are asking Brian Knowlton, asking welfare check on intern Andrew. He's doing okay.
He's okay.
Yeah. He's doing
hey, I might have missed this with my poor Canadian connection today.
Yeah.
Did we talk about firing Cam York into the Sun yet or no?
We talked about Cam York's contract situation. That they're pushing it ahead.
That's right. You said about yeah.
That I said I think his name is out there, but not.
That was the name.
Yeah, it's out there, but not like, oh, we absolutely have to trade this guy. It's kind of like, we would consider it.
I would trade him.
I think you do have to trade the guy.
Tippett is
only because you have a bunch of smaller defensemen, and somebody's got to go, whether it's him or Drysdale or Andre. I don't think they want to move Andre just yet. I think that they liked the progression that they saw out of Drysdale in the second half of last year. So, somebody's got, in my mind's got to go. But go ahead. What were you saying?
I would fire York into the Sun, but I was going to say Tippett. Tippett to me is like a name to keep an eye. Like Tippett's a name to keep an eye on. That contract at some point might look okay. I didn't like the deal then, and I certainly don't like it now. But I wonder if there are going to be teams, like I'm sure the Flyers have people internally who believe that he's going to figure it out and be more consistent. But like if there were a young winger on this team that I would absolutely pick up the phone if somebody called on, it would be Tippett.
So I don't think they're going to make a move. I don't think they're going to move Owen Tippett. I think Owen Tippett's going to be on the team to start the year. And talk to somebody about him as well. And they know, I mean, the team knows it was a down year for him, but they think it was a down year for reasons that are not necessarily hockey related. Well, I shouldn't say on ice related. They felt like he was in the right shape. They felt like, you know, there wasn't like, you know, he was battling any injuries or anything like that. They felt like he was in a good spot. I think I think that they feel like him with Rick Tocchet is going to give you a different player.
Gonna mesh better. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think
I certainly hope so for his sake.
And I think I think when you heard Tocchet at his introductory press conference say there's players that he wants to coach on this team, I think Owen Tippett was top of that list of guys. And look, it may end up being that it doesn't work, right? And it ends up being a bad contract, whatever. At that point, then maybe you think about moving him. But I don't think that they're interested in doing it now. I think that he's a player that they look at and say, we still believe in him, and we think with the right coach, he can get unlocked and be the player that we think he can be.
Yari here. Hear you guys talk, but like to sleep before the final. Nope. We're actually going to take you up to a puck drop. So
no, we're not
now. What else? What else did you want to get to? I feel like did you have anything else on your list? I know you had a really long list.
No, I think we've kind of touched on all the main things. I have my list here.
We had a guy, by the way, while you're looking, we had a guy who said that I need to be thrown off the show for my intro, doubted my masculinity because I drank a Starbucks coffee, and also apparently is an ageist. He doesn't like millennials. You know what I didn't do, Ant? I didn't ban him from the comments section. I brought his comment up. You know why? Because I like to out the ageists. There is no place for ageism on Snow the Goalie. Let us be clear.
It's good. Good for you.
Yeah, continue. Oh, this was a good one. Goalie talk. There was somebody who asked a little bit ago, and I thought this was an interesting takeaway from Danny's comments. Not talking about going out and getting a vet, although I think you and I probably agree that they likely will. But he did bring up a bunch of names. Like he highlighted 5, I want to say, goalies in the pipeline, including a couple of the guys that they drafted more recently. He also brought up Zavragan and Bjarnason, who we know have constantly been in our conversation. But interesting that he highlighted that goalie depth. Do you think there's any strategy to that? Is there like starting to float those names out there? Because teams are always looking for young goalie prospects. You're not going to get like anything of substantive value for them that are, it's going to change your life. But is there any gamesmanship to that? Or do you really just think it's Danny saying, hey, we're actually feeling pretty good about our long-term potential goalies, while not exactly highlighting how bad the situation is right now?
I think it's more that, right? I think that they still believe Ersson could be a tandem goalie, but not a number one. And I don't think that they're going to spend for a number one, but I think that they'll bring in a bridge until one of those young guys is ready to roll, and then kind of hand it over, right? But I don't think that there's anything to it. I think Fedotov actually is going to stay in the organization. I think that what they'll end up doing is they'll end up waiving him, and no one will claim him because of that contract. And he'll end up being the guy who plays in the AHL and be your third goalie. I think that's ultimately what it's going to be. Kolosov's a mess. It's a total mess. He's telling people he's going back to Belarus. The Flyers are like, he's under contract with us. We expect him to be in camp. I think ultimately they're just going to part ways with him, but I think they're going to do it on their terms and not on Kolosov's terms. They're not going to let Kolosov dictate that. Yeah. So, I think
this is interesting. Yeah, I mean, like, sit down with. So Scott J. Cox here, noted ageist, says goalie send down Fedotov to bury the contract. Sit down with Sam and Kolosov and say we're going with you to put up or shut up. I just don't think the Kolosov is good enough, right? Like this is the real shame, and like I'm sure someday there will be like a 30 for 30 done on what happened with Kolosov and everything that has gone into that mess of a situation. But suffice it to say, if this were a normal situation, he would have accepted that assignment to the Phantoms last year, right? It would have, like, if there had been any issues, they wouldn't have gotten aired out. He probably would have played the whole season there. Maybe he develops, and then maybe going into 25-26, he is viewed as the guy that could be the backup. And instead, for myriad reasons, it didn't happen. And he probably does find himself on the outs. Like, I can't figure out a tangible way for him to get time at the NHL this year, shy of like everyone retiring in front of him, you know, because he's certainly not going to be thrilled with becoming Fedotov's backup in the AHL, right? So not a great situation. The only good thing there is there's not a lot of money tied up with him. So it's not like you have to bury a $4 million, $5 million cap hit, you know?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. That's pretty much it for me for today.
You sure?
You know, I'll keep my in my nose to the grindstone and keep finding out what I can find out. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. This is an important 2 weeks for the Briere, as you once called it.
Well, there are people who are throwing out an idea here. This is the last thing I want to talk about. Literally, it is the last thing that I would want to talk about, but I've seen it in the comments. So I want to see your thoughts. I know what they're going to be, but David Waitman says, maybe bring back Carter if acquitted. Jim McKissick over on Facebook says, Hart, there are people who have been floating this idea out there, and I am 1,000,000% convinced that, one, the Flyers probably would not be interested, and two, Hart probably wouldn't be interested in coming back here either for a bunch of reasons. Do you see that the same way? Because in fairness, they didn't bury him. Like when these accusations came up, they could have taken a much more firm and what's the appropriate term for it? But like they could have distanced themselves significantly more than they did. And for better or worse, they chose not to do that. But I don't know. Like, I just can't imagine that he would come back. I can't imagine there's interest from either side, right?
I have a hard time believing that if these guys get acquitted, that anybody would bring them back in the NHL, considering the details as they came out. Right? I mean, even if they're not found guilty, there's enough of that story that came out that puts a stain on those guys that is almost impossible to rub off, right? And I don't think that that's a real consideration. Maybe, I don't know, maybe somebody in a small market that doesn't have a lot of media coverage takes a flyer, takes a chance on a guy. Edmonton's got media coverage. Like,
dude, Edmonton fans have been talking about it though, Ant, for like 6 months. If he's acquitted, how quickly can we get him in net? Because they knew Skinner sucked too.
Yeah,
but now,
when I say that, I say and not saying that this team needs Carter Hart, but maybe a team like Anaheim. I think they have one writer that covers them, and they don't even travel. So when they're on the road, they don't even have a media presence right around them. Like that could be something like, one of these guys ends up on a team like that, like an organization like that. It's certainly not going to happen here. It's not going to happen in Philadelphia.
Okay. So anybody who saved their Hart Flyers jersey and maybe had their kids wearing them to the carnival this past year, they're not going to get any wear out of having
the equivalent. The equivalent I'll make in another sport is Trevor Bauer. Right?
Don't know how fair that comparison is, but yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's a guy who didn't even go to court. Everything was thrown out about him. Right. Mm-hmm. Those women were were proven to be making stuff up. Now, it doesn't mean, at least two of them were, I should say, not all of them, but it doesn't mean that there wasn't something that went there that was a little nefarious, but
Sure.
No charges against him, nothing, whatever. And yet he can't get a job in Major League Baseball. Why?
Yeah.
Because that stain exists. I think it's similar in that vein that the stain exists on these guys.
I think if Hart gets acquitted, he'll be back in the league within 2 years.
Yeah.
I'd almost guarantee it.
I don't know.
I would actually be, I'll tell you what, I'd be more surprised if he's not back in the league in 2 years following acquittal, if that's what happens. I'd be more surprised if he's not back in the league than if he is.
We'll see.
Teams get desperate. They get desperate. Anyway, all right. I think it's probably a good place to end. Look at us. We went all over the spectrum today. We don't do a show for a couple of weeks. We come back and there's just a ton of stuff to talk about. I have no idea how this is going to look or sound on the other side. We'll find out and post at it. And big thank you to everybody who joined us live on YouTube, Facebook, and X. Big thank you to everybody who listens after the fact in the podcast feed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. You can, of course, not only listen to Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast, but you can also listen to Anthony, young Anthony, on Mondays and Fridays with Big Bet Bob Wankel as they break down everything about the Philadelphia Phillies over on Fightin' Words, which you can find on the Fightin' Words YouTube channel. You can find on the Joy Media YouTube channel. You can also find your podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. The best Phillies podcast in the business.
Big story out of the Phillies today while we were recording this, while we were doing the show.
What was that? I missed it.
I guess you didn't see it. No Nick Castellanos in the lineup today. First time he's missing a start since September of 23. And it was a result of him saying something inappropriate to the manager after getting pulled from the game the other night.
Wow.
Yeah.
How about that? So you're going to have him come on Fightin' Words next? Because for those who missed it, young Aaron Nola was a guest on Fightin' Words on Monday. So, and why am I doing a better job of plugging your show for you than you are? Like, what the hell?
You're the hype man.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
All right. And I guess if you want to, you can, of course, find me on the Russ Joy Show, wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I don't think I'm going to do a show today. I think I am just going to do Wednesday and Friday. We'll see how the connection holds up here in Canada. We got to talk about the NBA, the NHL, Major League Baseball. Lots of stuff to get into this week. So, Ant, it's lovely seeing you. We congratulate young Bundy Jr. on his graduation. We congratulate Bundy's daughter on her upcoming wedding in a week's time, just over a week's time. And most importantly, we wish Bundy the best of luck because God knows all the stress that's going on with those preparations. One has to assume that on the inside right now, Bundy sounds like this. With that, thanks for listening, maybe even watching. Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast. We will talk to each and every one of you in the very, very near future, and we have some other stuff.
Tim Hortons Maple Glaze, Russ.
Tim Hortons Maple Glaze? Okay. I'll have to do it. Yeah. I'll look for it. If I do, I'll tweet it out. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right. Have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to each and every one of you very soon here on Snow the Goalie. Have a great day, everybody.